welcome back to the channel. Today's going to be a bit different. I really enjoy a game called Sharp Practice, specifically the second edition of Sharp Practice put out by Two Fat Lardies. And I also quite enjoy the Martist War. So I took the Sharp Practice and I thought, okay, how can I make this into something to play the Martist War with? So this video is going to be about my conversion for Sharp Practice 2 to play the Martist War. Okay, if you haven't checked out my video on the Martist War, it's on the channel. I'll put a link in the description below. So I won't get into it at all. So my thinking behind this is that I didn't want to change anything drastic about the game, because otherwise you might as well just invent your own game, which I don't want to do because I'm not a games developer. I'm not even claiming that this is a good conversion. It's just the one that I use and the one that seems to work. So there are a few special rules. The first special rule that we go with is the British have an ammunition type quantity. This can also work for the Zulu War as well. Any sort of colonial war, I don't have Zulu stuff, so mine is specific to the Martist War. The British have ammunition: critical, adequate, and plentiful ammunition. The British start as critical. You can pay to have the ammunition upgraded, so you pay 1 point for every 2 groups in your army. Every 2 groups in your army with breech-loading rifles. So if you take some Bashi Bazookas with flintlock muskets, you don't have to pay for them to be upgraded. They're always considered adequate ammunition. So say you have five groups of British regulars, and so you pay an extra 2 points to have them upgraded to adequate ammunition. Adequate ammunition is just your normal ammunition rate. Then you can also upgrade them to be plentiful ammunition. Plentiful ammunition gives you a +1 to your force morale at the start of the game. That's not +1 to the roll, that's +1 to the final figure. And critical ammunition is different. So each formation is easier. You could do it by group, but formation is just so much cleaner. Rolls a d6 at the start of the start of the game, and that's the number of fire actions that they can take. So critical ammunition is quite bad. Plentiful ammunition is quite good. At the end of any chapter, draw a card from the deck. So reshuffle the deck and then draw a card. If it's a British card, flag or numbered, then you drop 1 level of ammunition. And it only ever happens once. If you're critical, everyone instantly runs out of ammunition. So there is a purpose to buy plentiful ammunition rather than just making it with adequate. If a chapter does end, you can potentially drop down. The next one is an extra unit called the local scout, or the experienced scout. This is an exploring officer on a horse who actually takes part in the game. And he's activated the same way as a marksman sort of activate. He's activated from the army commander. He clears terrain as if he's a level 3 leader. We'll get more into that later. And he can move as cavalry. He actually moves as cavalry, so he rolls an extra d6 when moving, compared to that of a normal leader. He also has this sort of ability to pluck our heroes from the jaws of defeat. So if he moves in contact with a British leader, he can pick them up and move that character with him, so long as they stay in contact. This represents maybe the unit's just about to be charged with this huge Martist horde, so he can ride forward and grab your army commander and bring him back to the next rank to continue the fight. Not the most historical thing, but it is a little bit of it's a bit of a fun. It's something that would happen in a book, and since Sharp Practice is mostly about recreating novels and cinema of this sort of era, I think it works. So I mentioned clearing terrain. Another rule I put in is called behind every rock and shrub. The Martist player can launch. The Martists were famous for just, in Zulus as well, just for coming out of nowhere. So you can use any major piece of terrain that's not a building as a jump-off point for your Martists, as a deployment point. So if there's a big rocky outcrop, a couple of trees, the Martist could use that as a deployment point. It doesn't become a deployment point, so you don't lose points for having it captured, but it follows all the other rules for a deployment point. Only once men have actually spawned from it. So you might have 2 or 3 big pieces of terrain. And the British also have a rule called all clear, sir. So the British can clear this terrain. And the way the British clear the terrain is you spend an action with your officer. So you activate your officer, you have 2 actions. One might be to activate the unit, and one is to clear terrain. And so you decide to activate the unit, and then you decide to clear the big pile of rocks over there. And the way you do that is you roll 2d6. You roll twice, 2d6 for each level your officer is. So if he's a level 3 leader, you roll 6d6. If he's a level 2 leader, 4d6. And the goal is to get 12 or higher. And if you get 12 or higher, that piece of terrain is considered clear. The martyrs cannot use it as a deployment point. They can't spawn for it anymore. Anyone who's already come from there is fine, but it's basically cut off. They put a token down to represent this. So I've tried to create this sort of balance between being able to come from anywhere and to swarm the enemy, but also the British have to be able to mitigate things that can happen to them. The British have to be able to say, right, my left flank is going to be secure. So those two big pieces of rocky outcrops over there, we're going to make sure those are clear before we form up with those to our rear. The next rule is called General Confusion. Once per game, the Martyrs player can say, right, the next card that's dealt from this deck is going to be the Tiffin card. No matter what it is, it's going to be the Tiffin card. So the next card out of the deck is the Tiffin card. And what happens here is the British player discards half their command cards, half their flags, rounding down, and the Martyrs player discards half their flags, rounding up. This sort of like where the British have been a bit indecisive. Maybe the Martyrs have sort of snuck around a bit and they've just won the initiative suddenly, or perhaps the Martyrs are just doing something that's sort of bizarre that everyone needs a little bit of time to adjust. And the reason this is quite a useful trick for the Martyrs is the Martyrs actually have 2 more command cards than they would normally have. So if in a standard game you would have 4 each, the Martyrs would actually have 4 versus 6. So a Martyrs player who has 5 command cards in his hand might go, right, you know what, British player's only got 1 there. I'm gonna make this the next Tiffin card. He's gonna lose his command card. I'm gonna keep 3 of my own, and I'm gonna take 3 actions which he cannot counter at all. Just one example. The next 2 rules are also linked, the same as Behind Every Rock and Shrub and All Clear Sir. This is Brave Chaps What and Courtesy of Mr. Adams. So Brave Chaps What, the Sudanese, these Martyrs can remove a single figure from a unit, or 2 figures if it's a tribal unit. So it's 2 figures for a tribal unit, a single figure for a non-tribal unit. And this figure is killed, it doesn't count as shock or anything, and you pick a British unit within 12. And that British unit has to roll a d6. On a 1 to 3, the unit takes a point of shock. On a 4 to 6, they lose d3 minus 1 shots the next time they fire. And on a 6, nothing happens. So the Martyrs would very, very frequently make suicidal charges towards the British. And this represents 1 or 2 guys just running towards the enemy. If you roll a 1 to 3, they sort of get a bit of shock. They're a bit uncomfortable. Oh, what's going on here? Is this a mass charge? And this guy just sort of got the message a bit early. I'll be okay. A 4 to 5 is some sort of overzealous firing. A couple of guys fire, and by the time the sergeant or the officer's got around to, stop doing that, they're not ready to shoot next time the unit fires. Courtesy of Mr. Adams is actually a bit of a thematic one where the officer in charge of the unit can sort of hold your fire, I'll take care of this, and he rolls a d6 instead of the unit, so you use the following chart instead. On a 1, the Martyrs stabs the officer. Remove the Martyrs anyway. The gentleman around him take care of it. But roll on an injured leader table and gain a point of shock. On a 2 to 5, the leader kills the enemy and nothing happens. But the officer may not add his level to the unit's next firing action. But he can also remove a point of shock from the unit. So 2 to 5 this is the officer being a bit of an example. And but he's giving up his own ability to direct the unit's fire. On a 6, nothing happens. Remove a point of shock from the unit and continue on as normal. Now there is one issue with wargaming with breach loading weapons, and that is that the British player can just simply double fire every turn. So okay, I'm going to fire. Oh, cool. Fire again. Oh, okay, cool. Fire again, and I despise defensive games where you just literally just sit there and fire while the enemy comes at you. So what I've done is, for each successive firing action you take, it gets 1 step harder. So if you're hitting on a 3, so the first, you might have 2 actions in a turn. Okay, so you've been active with 2 actions, and you're hitting on a 3. So the first time you fire, okay, I'm going to fire once, hitting on a 3. And then you go, you know what, I want to put more firing into the enemy. I'm going to fire at them again. So you go, okay, you would hit on a 3 because this is the second time you fired in a row. You're hitting on a 4. And then the next turn comes around and you go, okay, I really just want to keep shooting. Okay, so you were hitting on a 4 because of the first time you fired. it is now a 5 because it's now the third time that you have fired. And again, 6, and once you hit 6, it stays at 6, doesn't get any higher than that. So you might think, okay, so I'm pretty much just stuck with black powder rifles. You're essentially just adding in a loading step, a sort of optional but basically a mandatory loading step. But what they can do is you can always present to erase any and all modifiers. So if you're hitting on 6s and you decide to present and fire, you go right back to hitting on 3s, which would become 2s because you presented. So it does encourage the British to, you can, of course, always just dump rounds on the enemy. You can decide, you know what, they're coming, dump rounds on the enemy. Who cares if we're hitting on 3s, then 4s, then 5s? But you can also take these consistent, long-range, accurate shots. Anyone with breech loaders can do this. If you do not have control volley special rule, then your present just simply doesn't count as presenting. It's just a pause step in the firing. And using the Sharpulator, I've come up with some profiles for the various warriors in this. I've only come up with profiles for the sort of units that I use in my games. There are more here that could be represented. I'll just quickly go through them. So we have regulars with breech loading rifles. They are formation always, first fire yes, control volley always, crashing volley 2, step out 3, drill 1. And they have the sharp practice special rule. So these are just, and breech loading rifles, of course. Then we have Bashi Bazookas. Bashi Bazookas are they're quite interesting characters. You've got a picture of some of my own Bashi Bazookas on the screen. Bashi Bazookas have muskets. They just have muskets. Formation no shock. First fire yes. Control volley no. Crashing volley 0. Step out 1. Drill 0. And they also have the sharp practice rule. The early tribal, the Martist warriors. They are formation no, first fire no, control volley no, crashing volley no, stepping out 1, drill 0. They have pas de charge, tomahawks, and big choppers. And the Jahidya skirmishers, these are sort of slave riflemen, have breech loading rifles, formation always, first fire no, control volley no, crashing volley 0, step out 1, drill 0, sharp practice, tactical, movable deployment point. And of course, these are your skirmishers. These are your irregular skirmishers. Your scouting cavalry are aggressive, have tally-ho, and movable deployment point. These represent either camels or horse troops. They have step out 1 and a drill of 3. So that's just how I play the Anglo-Martist War. Of course, I created this so I can just change the rules whenever I want, which means if anything comes up in the game that interferes with our enjoyment of the game, we can just ignore it because I wrote the conversion thing. But if anyone's curious about playing war games in this period, I would be more than happy for you to use these rules. And let me know, please, in the comments below if you do end up using these, how you like them, and if you think any changes should be made. Thank you very much for watching. Have a wonderful day. If you like these videos, make sure you tell all your friends about them. If you'd like to watch more about the Martist War, I have 2 videos on my channel, one about the First Battle of El Teb, and one about the Martist War overall, covering the Battle of Saukan, First El Teb, Second El Teb, and Abu Klea. Abu Klea, culminating in, of course, the death of Gordon at Khartoum. Also, if you're interested in other types of warfare, the Boers against Zulus, and Zulus against British could easily be represented by these rules. So if you're interested in Boers v Zulus, check out my video on the Battle of Blood River, the Miracle of Blood River, which will also be included in the description. Make sure you check out the Two Fat Lardies YouTube channel. They play games of sharp practice as well. They played all sorts of games. I believe they actually put a video up of General d'Armée, which is fascinating. I've never actually seen that played before. I'd be keen to try that with my own miniatures. Anyway, make sure you check those guys out. Support them. Support what they do. If you enjoyed this video, give me a like. And I'm going to get back to painting some more miniatures so I can make some more videos and keep you guys entertained. Thank you very much.